I'm going to jump off with this one because this is just more or less hanging out. Sure. And we have our questions that we have to go over and so forth. But this this deadlift technique thing, it just won't die. Like every question that I get and every time I look up the trending, it's always about deadlift technique.
Sure.
And normally that's going to be supported with my view of just don't deadlift, but it's not because of the reason I don't think you should deadlift, just because I hate it, because you're going to get hurt. So I have some interesting stats that I pulled up when I had John Rupo out last week, just in regards to injuries in training and as they relate to strongman, CrossFit, bodybuilding, and so forth. The first thing, because they'll say, because it's going to come up with the strongman as we talk about that.
Okay.
What I found was that, here we go. Where is my main notes? The main notes were 70%, just a little bit over, of all injuries in the gym that end up going to the emergency room are because of dropped weights, equipment malfunction, or miscellaneous.
Okay.
So essentially people just not putting their weights away.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody I know has dropped a weight on their foot and so forth. And so I think that needs to be stated before somebody says deadlifting is going to get, you know, you're going to get hurt deadlifting, or if you do strongman, you're going to get hurt.
Well, with deadlift, the weight's on the floor.
Well, just going in the gym. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Going to the gym, you have that incident. And then, so that like washes out all of that. Then when we get down,
That's at least 70% of the injuries washed away.
Yeah.
Right away.
That's why you got to train at home.
Yes.
So
No one wants to set you up to get guillotined by a 2.5 pound plate.
anecdotally, I have statistics.
Yes.
I've gotten injured on squats and bench. I've never gotten injured on deadlift so far.
Okay, we'll see that. Anecdotally plays in very well. So that leaves 20% of the other injuries that would be soft tissue related or fatigue related or overtraining related, that falls in there. Now, when we look into powerlifting and we look at incidents per 1,000 hours,
Oh, I'm going to
that's
love
how
that.
they kind of do this.
Okay.
The powerlifting in general was 2 to 6 incidents per 1,000. I'm sorry, 2.6 to 3.7.
Per 1,000 hours of powerlifting.
Per 1,000 hours. Now, how you define the 1,000 hours?
Yeah, this is what I'm wondering. So if you're a multiply powerlifter, how many reps get done in 1,000 hours of multiply versus CrossFit?
Do we count the nap window in between the sets?
Well, you have to.
Well,
you
have to.
Optimal performance. Anyway.
Yeah, so the prevalence of injury is 38.7% of the competitive, that was for bodybuilding. So powerlifting, the prevalence is 70 to 87% of the competitive. Now for bodybuilding, it's 0.24 for 1,000 hours and 38%, which makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, lighter loads. General fitness is 0.21 for 1,000, right? But they're going to make up the majority of the dropped weights on the foot and all the other kind of stuff.
Sure.
Olympic weightlifting was 2.4 to 3.3. The prevalence was, this is a weird stat. Keep in mind, I'm pulling from several GPTs. It was 10.7 to 68. So we're just going to say, it's like 50 to 68. It's up there with the others.
I wonder if it's counting the weightlifters or the CrossFitters doing weightlifting.
Well, that's a separate one in here.
Okay.
Strongman was one of the highest, 5.5 per 1,000 hours, 82% report injuries. And then the CrossFit was another odd one that went from like 1.2 to 18. So we'd just say like 15, but 4.2 per 1,000 hours is what it was, 27 to 50%. So strongman kind of rank is the highest for this chart's kind of interesting here with the strongman. Boom, right there.
There you are, Ilya.
That is
sitting pretty.
That is us.
Yes. So
we are the biggest always.
Yeah. So you know, being that I hate the deadlift so much, just because I don't like to do it, I'm going to say what exercise gets incorporated with both the most frequently. So it's all because of the deadlift is where I'm going to come out from.
Oh, just the deadlift.
But to put this all in comparison, when we look at, I think football was 36%. Soccer was 16%. You know, so when you're talking total injuries per 1,000 hours, all these strength sports are extremely low in there. And
well, with soccer, you have to count all the feigned injuries as well. You know, that would put their way higher.
exactly.
All the dives. Yeah.
Exactly. So I guess my roundabout point is not deadlifting because you're afraid that you're going to get hurt deadlifting is kind of ludicrous.
Well, it is, yeah. And it's an interesting perception, isn't it? Because like you see the same with like youth athletes as well. It's like, do not get them in a gym doing anything. Like a 15-pound goblet squat is going to like close their growth plates and injure them. But it's like, but they can sprint all day after school. Do you know what I mean? Look, like the shearing forces and all that going on with like a sprint or a jump is enormous. Whereas like a 50 or like a push-up is not okay. So I think we all have like these kind of underlying strange biases.
Of course we do.
But what I would say, I think should we say the risk for deadlift is that for me, it's kind of like running in that I think the reason a lot of people get injured running is because they just presume they can do it when they shouldn't presume that. Like their gait is terrible. They're probably maybe too heavy to start with, blah, blah, blah. They go straight on hard surfaces, all this type of, like the deadlift to many probably seems the most approachable because the bar is on the ground. We don't have to set up any equipment and all of us pick up stuff day to day. So they go in with the baseline assumption like, well, I can deadlift because I pick things up. That's one of the reasons why it's so functional and great to train it. But that also opens the door then to being the most naive about how it should be done and possibly being overconfident, which then leads to perhaps a higher proportional injury rate.
Well, so how many videos do you see of people posting online with a new PR and it's the worst deadlift you've ever seen?
Well, that's what I was going to say is, I mean, you cover the powerlifting, general fitness, you cover the strongman, you've been around this stuff your whole entire life, and MMA as well. You know, just this broad range and everybody's deadlifting. And for the most part, from what I've seen, most of what they're doing is right. Okay, technically. Half. Like half of what they're doing is right, but then when they look at the tutorials, they're going to try to fix everything to where they don't need to fix everything. They just need to fix the couple things that are really screwed up. What do you think those couple things are if we're going to go with a beginner? Just say a beginner. I'm not, I got to reframe that. To us, a beginner would be probably what an intermediate is to most other people. True. Not somebody just walking in the gym for the first time.
So someone's that's been at it for a year or two at the gym and is probably starting to be actually interested in lifting seriously.
Yeah, enough that they actually want to try to figure out how to deadlift better.
Yeah.
I think for me, there's two main factors that mean people probably need to be more cautious with their deadlift training. The first is that it's one of the very few lifts that you get rewarded with higher performance when you do it very badly. Like you pull a third attempt looking like a fishing rod, you maybe make a weight that you couldn't make with good alignment. Good is obviously subjective. And then the second one for me is that it's the one lift that isn't determined by your own proportions. What I mean is for you, for me, for you, for the basketball player who's 6'9" with the 7'2" wingspan, the bar is X number of inches off the ground for everyone. So if you're that person who's super tall with T-Rex arms, you have to deadlift if you're doing it from the floor. It's the same for you that it is for everyone else. Whereas like a back squat is going to be determined by your own anthropometry or whatever. So I think for that reason, we should maybe be a little bit more cautious in general when it comes to deadlifting. But I think the biggest thing that most people need to step back from when it comes to deadlifting is even intermediates, what we may be referring to as beginners, is very few people really actually know how to hip hinge, which is a pretty integral part of the deadlift. The deadlift from the floor is a miniature squat followed by a Romanian deadlift. So it's a bit of knee extension and a pure hip hinge. And most people cannot Romanian deadlift well.
There's a lot of advanced lifters that can.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I would say is if you can't control, we're all probably going to agree that you should probably Romanian deadlift less weight than you full deadlift.
Sure.
So let's say you take a weight that's 60% of your 1 rep max actual deadlift. You should probably be able to hip hinge down from the top, which is easier than doing it from the bottom up with that load extremely well, but most can't. So I think most probably need to step back from full range deadlifting if they're having technical issues or injury risks, niggles and stuff that are showing up, and actually learn how to hip hinge from the top down first, learn how to control the eccentric. Because what's the other thing that nobody does on the deadlift that we do to some degree on every other lift? We control the eccentric. Like, you don't just drop to the bottom of a squat or a heavy bench press, but on deadlift, we don't. So all of the benefits of the motor control, the motor learning, the tendon strengthening, all that type of thing we get from that eccentric phase, we just choose to ignore on deadlift. And there's a reinforcing factor where like, well, I don't do it because it's tiring and it's hard. Well, when you avoid something, it stays tiring and hard forever. And then you get to the point where your concentric strength, i.e. what you can lift off the floor versus what you can actually lower safely, there's this enormous discrepancy. Personally, I think that's where probably the higher injury risk of deadlift comes from relative to other lifts, because we don't do that. That's the one thing I would say that we just choose to completely ignore and not train with deadlift. So how do you do that? You go back and you do Zercha good mornings, you do Romanian deadlifts, and you get strong on those. And if you get strong on those, your regular deadlift will go up, providing you're doing some kind of squatting or whatever and working on your quad strength. So that for me would be the main one.
Would it be safe to tell them to start with the bar, say 4 inches off the floor?
Yep.
So 2 blocks, stand up with it however they want. And then from that top position, hip hinge or Romanian deadlift it down with as much control as they can and for a soft touch, and then just reverse it from there.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're going to do a deadlift webinar in a couple of weeks. So this is great timing, right? So like the second phase of the deadlift, which is the hip dominant part on the way up, starts for most people like top of your shin, patella tendon, below your kneecap, right? If you can't Romanian deadlift well to that position, I would argue slightly lower because we don't want to be on the extremes of range of motion, then you probably shouldn't be deadlifting from the floor, full stop. I mean,
so higher than mid shin. So this one may be higher than 4 inches. I mean, 4 inches is kind of hard to.
Yeah, I mean, for him, it's going to be a different height for me, right? But, you should be able to Romanian deadlift to the top of your shin purely from hip hinging with no change in alignment with some kind of reasonable load, whatever reasonable load is for that person. Otherwise, I would argue about you deadlifting heavy from the floor, at least for now.
I would say if the demographic we're speaking about does that, that will solve 90% of all their technique problems, over time. They just need to commit to 3 months, 4 months of doing a block that way.
Yeah, for sure.
And then lowering it from there.
Yeah.
And then the injury thing's gone and the deadlift technique thing's gone, because we've all seen that people with the deadlift, because there's a lot to it. We have tutorials on the website for deadlift technique. For some people, there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
For other people, they just like bend over, pick it up. It's fine.
Sure.
Right. But most people are not. They fall somewhere in between.
Sure. And I think the other thing that maybe is unique to deadlift, which you don't have the option to do, is if you're really bad at hip hinging, you can pull sumo and have to hip hinge less and probably now move more load, which basically pushes the can further down the road and allows you to get away with probably higher training loads with the equally poor technique for longer. And then all these kind of problems probably just strike you, but later on and even worse. Most people aren't going to say, oh, well, my back squat sucks. Very few people will choose to half squat actively because they're avoiding getting better at squat. Whereas a lot of people will go, conventionals never felt good for me. I'm going to go sumo. And the same loads and everything felt better. It's like, well, sure, because you're now moving them a third less distance or whatever it might be. And you don't have to own that movement pattern that you're terrible at, which you probably should get good at.
Well, that's a key thing that we probably need to circle back just to reiterate, because I think this is really good advice, but if they just end up doing heavy block pulls with whatever form allows them to pull the most weight, which would most probably happen, then this is not going to work. It's going to make things absolutely worse.
Sure. And I would say the caveat would be Romanian. This is why I like the Romanians, because if you round over like a fishing rod, it's really hard to reverse a Romanian deadlift. Yeah. A block pull, you can get away with more because the bar is supported in the bottom position. But like, if you were to do a Romanian deadlift slow, like with a pause in the bottom position, that's probably going to weed out a lot of people overshooting the load or the reps, whatever it might be. The other thing that I like to do in that scenario would just be to do make them do snatch grip. Like snatch grip sucks.
No, I think that's a good idea though.
It's going to limit the load.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, there you go. Now you can't put 4 plates per side or whatever. Like, use straps, that's fine. We don't want to be lifting like 25 pounds a side, but that's going to also give us a limiting factor, which is either probably going to be grip or upper back strength. So that's going to give, before we get too far into that fatigue of postural strength in terms of like the lower back or the hip hinge. So they probably have to end the set before it starts turning into the stuff we don't want to see.
Well, what actually feeds into that also is probably why people experience more issues and injuries on deadlift compared to the other lifts. The psychological factor of, if you're doing a heavy squat or a heavy bench, you realize that the weight's on you, and if you're failing it, you're probably getting stabled by it, crushed by it, or whatever other iteration of that by it. With the deadlift's on the floor. Perceptually, it may seem safer, so people might try to push it faster sooner than they're actually able to push it. So because the thought is you can just drop it. What most people don't realize is failing a rep is significantly more taxing than doing a successful amount of reps, 2, 3, 4, 5 reps with that same weight that you could. So that also feeds into the injuries and deadlift significantly more.
So like when you're at a comp, for example, how often does the deadlift last?
Very rarely.
Right. So you have to do that earlier in the day. So knowing that, like, the deadlift is probably the most taxing standard lift. I'm not going to say it's more taxing than a heavy yoke, because then you'll punch me, because it's very different, I'm aware. But let's say that in terms of a static lift, the deadlift is the most taxing. How do you have to approach that then, knowing that you have all of these things to come afterwards? Because, like, yeah, you want to win, but it could be an AMRAP, it could be a max load, but, like, you know that, and I'm sure you both can espouse to this, like a 100% deadlift compared to a 96% deadlift.
So different.
Is like two different animals. Like, the latter, you're doing the other events. If the former, you're crawling through the other event. So how do you find that balance on comp day when there's a lot on the line, where you kind of have to judge, like, and yes, powerlifters have to do this, but we deadlift last. And sometimes we only deadlift once or twice.
Yeah,
like,
well, for powerlifters, it's a full sense.
So like, as a strongman, when it, sometimes it might be the first event. How do you approach that?
Well, the last competition I did in Italy, that was a prime example where the deadlift was the second event. Pretty sure, yeah. And I got my 4 reps on it, whilst everyone else got 1 or 2 reps. And I could have gotten the 5th one. I started pulling it, and I felt that if I pulled the 5th rep, that would be it. That would be me done for the day. So I decided to just let it go there, and then I lost out on taking first place on the event due to that, because Rain O'Neill came in and got the last 5th rep. But it let me carry on in the competition and actually do a good performance the rest of the day, rather than my back and hips and everything being shot through.
Yeah.
So yeah, you pull back when you have to. And
have you ever made that mistake where you overshot that deadlift and then the rest of your events just, there's a smirk there. Okay, I'm not going to make you go and live your regrets there.
If we want to get deep in the weeds just with the powerlifting and being last, if it's happened to me a couple times, if it's an opener or maybe a second, and from the start, you know you're not where you need to be. Sometimes it's better just to let it go, and then not wear yourself out on the opener, which should be easy, but because you were too aroused or whatever it was, and the bar was too far forward or too far back or whatever it was, instead of straining through it and doing a stiff leg deadlift, which is going to absolutely crush whatever thought you had on the third, it's better just to we're deep in the weeds here. It's better just to let go, but you need a lot of experience to be able to make that decision on that time. But that kind of does not as much as them, because on the other thing is you got placings too, and you may have 2 people in front of you that are pulling 150 pounds more than you know you're capable of. So then it's, well, I just need to pull whatever the minimum I have to pull to ensure that third place, and who gives a shit about the other 50 pounds when it can impact the next events that are coming up. So it's a strategic game too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, you were just at CanFit, and it's a giant event for not strength coaches per se, but the fitness community. So forth.
The one thing I would say that maybe was surprising, but in a good way, was how broad the demographic was.
So with that, and we're still on the deadlift. How many in the demographic that would be coaches or trainers, which probably make up most of the people that were there or aspiring to be? are using the deadlift in their training protocols?
All of them.
Okay. All right.
When we did the powerlifting masterclass like we did at Swiss, right? Naomi and I got put on the bench, but, you know, you're all in close proximity, right? And yeah, they all deadlift, but most of them, and, you know, as we saw at Swiss, like, there's a lot of people just assuming that they're doing it right. And I don't mean this in a derogatory sense in any way at all. But what I would say is, again, we're all falling foul of just because we can move from A to B with the weight, we assume we're doing it well. You know, and this, for us, you know, we were on the bench press. This manifested in people benching like out here. Everyone's out here, like elbows super flared, shoulders shrugged up. That includes, so I had 3 people who competed there was a powerlifting competition at CanFit Pro. They competed either that morning, which was interesting because then they were in the afternoon, they were still vertical and talking, or they'd competed the previous day. They came in, I don't know what
For some reason, they still came in the next day.
Yeah, to do a powerlifting masterclass. I did question them on this, I assure you. And even the ones who competed were in the exact same camp. They're maybe a little bit better, but we're still talking about the same faults that everyone else did, right from, so this was great. So Ken was like, this is how it's going to run. Everyone's going to go up, lift the bar. You get assigned like a group of 5 or 6 people, you get 20 minutes with them, right? Go up, do the bar, let the coach watch you, or do your first set, nothing will be said. And then after that, we want the coach to give you just 1 or 2 specific cues that help you, like are individualized to you, which was a great premise until they get on the bench or under the bar or lift from, and they're all doing the same things wrong. And for example, like I had a couple of competitors, Naomi had a couple of competitors, but then Naomi also had 2 people in her group, for example, who said, I have never bench pressed before. So how do you give an individual cue there? But the thing that was interesting about it was like, you've got competitive athlete here, competitive powerlifter here, never stepped foot in the gym before here, all doing the same things wrong. Maybe to a different magnitude, like the beginners were way out here, maybe like super narrow with their grip. The competitive athletes were, you know, in a more sensible position, but touch points were generally still way too high up on their chest and all this thing. And like when you looked across the room, it's the same thing with the squat. It's the same thing with the deadlift. So sorry, Ken, but like Ken's plan kind of had to go out the window because it turned into like a group session where it's like, well, these are the 3 things you're all doing wrong.
Well, if we look at this with a bit of common sense, it makes sense because just one group's been doing it wrong for a longer period of time that they got stronger at doing it that way.
Yeah.
Reinforce that technique. So you can do
Well,
something
they got
well,
stronger.
but it doesn't mean you're doing it right. So
For sure.
Well, I'm not getting, that goes down that whole other strength coach rabbit hole. Like, well, they still did get stronger. So if they get stronger, but it's not a competitive endeavor, it's football or whatever it is, are they not stronger?
Yeah. I get
Right.
it.
So,
No, for sure.
You know,
I get that. The one thing I was going to say is like Ken was floating around. I'm like, you know, you bring him in, you're like, Ken, how many of your patients, you know, he's a chiropractor and 1,000 other things, you know, how many of your patients bench press out here? He's like, all of them. How many of them bench press in here, tucked, you know, lower touch? Very few of them, you know. So yes, you're stronger, but at what cost? Would always be like, there is no such thing as a bad exercise, except maybe bench dips or burpees. But there is always going to be a consequence or a cost to the exercise you do and then how you perform it. And that's the bit we have to kind of like go back and forth for. Like for him, you know, if you're doing an axle deadlift, you know, from just below the knee and you need to get the last rep to win, is he going to pull it like he's a fishing rod? You damn straight he's going to do that.
anyway, I can pull it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The consequence is worth the reward. But like all of these people, what we're seeing is like, if this is how you're lifting all day, every day, and you don't have any form of competitive endeavor either, then is it really worth the consequence of doing it poorly? Would be the point I would put across. You know, like there's going to be a way that all of them can probably make very quick, I would say easy. I mean, we did it in 20 minutes. So I'm not saying they were perfect 20 minutes later, but their risk or cost just went down drastically and their payoff probably came up. For some people, it could be as little as 15 or 20 minutes, like with a half decent coach, to just say, well, look, you know, your arm needs to be here. The bar is too high up your back. That's why it's hurting your neck. You know, the deadlift bar is starting over your toes, not over your midfoot and against your shin. it could be something as simple as that is the lowest hanging fruit that gives that person that much better like benefit to cost ratio.
Cost versus reward is a great thing that you bring up, because I am completely against hitching in a deadlift. It is allowed in strongman. You can most definitely use it. Some use it to great success and pull off some crazy PRs or event wins. I am 100% against it until I'm in competition. If it means I'm going to win the competition, if I hitch, I will hitch. But the problem is when people start employing that any cost to get a training lift done or a training PR. So that cost versus reward and knowing when you should apply it is very important also.
Well, if we're looking at the beginners moving forward, and my bias is going to play into this, but there's that longevity cost. You know, what are, I mean, if you are to speak to Ken Kanakin or these other people, what are the typical injuries that you see that are coming from these competitive, or people that train with weights for a long period of time? Lower back and shoulders. Usually is always click, click. And I'm thinking shitty deadlift, shitty squats, shitty benches, you know, shitty overheads. Would they still happen? Maybe, but later, that's where my strong bias would come in. For sure. Hopefully never, you know, because a lot of people do these things seriously for a long period of time and walk away relatively unscathed. Right. So it's going back to the original thought about the deadlift to get hurt. There's a lot of people that have spent decades deadlifting that have never been hurt.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
And I do think they bear the brunt of what people are probably doing on every movement. What I mean is your person who's benching up and out here, how are they doing their machine chest presses or their dumbbell press? You know, they didn't just get on a bench and blow off their AC joint one day. Like, they probably doing everything out here, every pressing movement for an extended, like the person whose lower back goes on deadlift, you know, maybe they're using the leg press and their butt's coming an inch up off the seat, and they're like, there's usually more than one factor to these things. It's just usually the deadlift or the squat or the bench press is the most, should we say, stressful per individual unit of use. And that's probably the thing that ultimately makes it go. But there's probably a lot of faulty movement going on that leads to ultimately that deadlift.
I see that there would be transference from a barbell lift to the dumbbells to the machines. And maybe the machines would transfer to the barbell, maybe. And the deadlift would have transference, and RDL's to flag. Squat would have transference. My bias to everything, because if you learn, I think that's maybe not the easiest movement to perfect how to brace on, but definitely up there in the top 5.
I would say anterior loaded squats probably teach it extremely well. Overhead press.
If we're staying with barbells, because we can get outside of barbells and carries and shit like that, and that's probably better with that, but that
we want to see you doing a sandbag carry.
I kind of do, but Tom's seen me do a couple carries here and there.
Not when I'm around.
It's like a quarter, man.
I signed an NDA.
I told him not to tell anybody.
There we go. Finally.
Were there any interesting things that you picked up while you were there? Because there's a lot of different people that you're exposed to.
I mean, these will be weird things to say as takeaways, I'm sure, but the two biggest things for me are kind of linked to what we've already talked about, which was, first off, it was a wide-ranging demographic. Like the talk that Naomi did about coaching competitors at competitions, I don't think they did like a poll. I don't think there was a single person in the audience who'd been coaching for less than 7 years or 6 years. Like that's experience. When that's the lowest, you know, the most inexperienced coach. That's very experienced. And then we had, you know, the powerlifting masterclass, some of Naomi's groups. You had 2 people who'd never bench pressed before. But when we take that really broad demographic, what you have to realize then is within that huge demographic, still probably 80 to 90% of them are in their first year to 18 months of coaching. Even though there's a wide demographic, the huge, you know, majority are still these, what we'd call beginner coaches. And as a coach and someone who coaches a lot, it was a really nice reminder actually that like, it's really cool to try and talk about the advanced stuff, and like I love to nerd out on things, but when it comes to actually helping people and like putting out useful information like we're here to do, that is who you're talking to 80 to 90% of the time. And I think we have our own biases where we kind of like put our more experienced mindset on perhaps and assume that people just know the deadlift, you know, the deadlift starts over your midfoot. The bar shouldn't leave your legs. whilst you're lifting it. You know what I mean? All these things we just don't think to bring up because you're like, that was like, sure, that is beginner stuff, but that is 80 to 90% of people. And also the beginners are the ones that need the help the most, you know? So that was a really nice reminder that like when we're thinking about making an impact, that's actually where you make the biggest impact by a mile.
Yes.
I would say. And then kind of like, as an aside to that then, it was really interesting to see how, for example, you do your intros at the start, right? I said, you know, I work Christian Thibodeau and Tib Army. I work with you here at Elite FTS, and this is in Canada. And, you know, CanFit Pro is a Canadian organization. Elite FTS, most people were glazed over. No idea. I mean this in no derogatory way to you or your company. But the same happened when Naomi did her intro at the powerlifting masterclass. 2 all-time world record squats. You know, that's 15 years of training, 12 years of competing to get 2 all-time world records, right? Again, people did not know what that meant, right? And it was just interesting because for me, like being able to work here, being able to coach people like you, being able to work with you, is a huge accolade for me personally. Like that's something, and that's something I'm very proud of, you know, and I will always be that way. You know, for Naomi, her all-time world records is 15 years of hard work. And yet, for those 80 to 90% of coaches that we're talking about that actually need the most help, they either don't know what it means or they don't care. What they do care about is the fact that when you are doing those talks, the 2 things that kind of came back in terms of feedback that were appreciated was, A, you made it simple. Like you didn't talk to me using like really advanced terms or like I was stupid. You brought it to my level. And B, you cared enough to listen to me and spend 2 minutes with me afterwards, like knowing a little bit about me so that you could help. Do you know what I mean? So like all of these really cool accolades, titles, you know, whatever we all end up getting throughout our career, for those 80 to 90% of people that really, really need the help, what they want is for you to give a shit and for you to be able to boil down things that may be complicated to really, really simple terms.
So they can use it.
Yeah. But, you know, it was just really nice to have that thrust into your face in like a really obvious way, because it's just, maybe it's an ego check or whatever, you know, but that was the 2 biggest takeaways I got from there, is that is what the world of fitness, strength, whatever really needs, is people who are willing to stop worrying about sounding like the smartest person in the room, which I am guilty of. We are all guilty of it to some degree, and just talk to people where the help is needed at the level they're at. That would be my biggest takeaway.
I was going to say, like, the true level or way of showing that you do know a subject very well is when you can explain it to a 5-year-old, essentially. Sure. So being able to not dumb it down, but simplify it in easy to understand terms and ways, and staying away from that trend that's been picking up a lot lately with the science lifting or, you know, the scientific way of doing stuff. That doesn't help the majority of the people. That just complicates things, throws terms that everyone starts regurgitating. That does not actually do anything for the lifting.
Sure.
But being able to explain those simple things and giving a simple checklist for people, that is the true masterclass of it.
Yeah. And that's what the powerlifting masterclass turned into, was like, you know, Naomi was the same, and there was 4 or 5 other very good coaches that it all came down to like 4 or 5 cues on all 3 lists. It had to be boiled down into 4 or 5 cues that everyone had to do, because you got 20 minutes, but those 4 or 5 cues actually applied to everyone. And if we go back to this, all of those would probably be half the size if everyone did those 4 or 5 things.
So it is up, 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 one of the cues?
Yeah.
Okay.
The louder, the better, though.
Yeah.
The other thing I've noticed, if I'm working with true beginners like that, I mean, it things get boiled down to the very simple stuff. You know, make sure you're grabbing the bar evenly, make sure your feet are even, you know, just the basic things. And then when you get back into, because we end up thinking the way that we do because the people we're around most of the time, right? And then when you get back in the gym and you're hyper concerned with, on the bench press, if somebody's using a shirt or whatever it is, you know, is the bar stacked with the forearm? Is the forearm stacked with the elbow? And you're looking for all these minute things, but after you do something like you just did, and you'll see this in the next week or so, you're going to start watching people in the gym. You're going to realize his grip is off. right? Because we stop looking for those really basic minor things. And the more advanced the lifter gets, some of those may become adjusted because of injuries and compensations and whatever it is. But now their feet aren't even on a certain thing, but it's always bent. You know, the last 2 years it's been that way, but they wonder why their hips all jacked up when they squat now. But we're so concerned with, you know, the stacking, where the rib cage is, where the diarrhea, where all the things are, that when you brought it back, you're like, holy crap. It's the same problem that the beginner, it's like a circle of the meathead circle of, I don't know what to call it, but it's a meathead circle. I don't want to say life. A meathead circle of technique.
Yeah, sure.
Right. You start off with all the same things, and then where you end up, where usually your biggest problems are, is you can't execute those same basic things to the same level before.
Yeah. And so I actually, then yesterday I was at OSU with some of their guys doing just random kind of couple of hours, and it was interesting talking to them, because we started talking about like breathing and bracing like we do at the Train Your Ass Off and stuff like that, and they were just a bit, and one of my talks at CanFit Pro was on that same subject. And it's just interesting because no matter who you present it to, what demographic, how advanced or how beginner, all of them have the same reaction. It's, oh my God, I have never braced before. You know, and we've had 900-pound squatters here or whatever at training.
You've done that to me.
You know, then we've got, you know, experienced strength and conditioning coaches at OSU. We've got complete beginners through to competitive athletes at CanFit Pro. The reaction is the exact same. It's, you have them do a dead bug properly, and they're like, I have no idea what breathing and bracing is anymore. And it's just, it's all in that same circle again. We are all doing the same things wrong. Now, the 900-pound squatter probably is bracing, but they're nowhere near bracing as well as they could relative to their capacity to brace, you know? So I think that's a great analogy, that kind of circle of technique, because like it all comes around in the end to like probably the same 4 or 5 things that we should all probably just really double down on and then not worry about the other stuff.
How much of that do you think is an issue of people taking for granted that basic? Because walking, nobody thinks about walking or how to walk better, more healthy or more efficiently, because we walk since we're 2 years old or 5 years old. So is that the same issue with bracing, you think, that everyone just starts bracing and just assumes that they can brace?
Yeah, 100. I mean, it's hilarious that you say it, because at one point when I got them all into like what would be a neutral pelvis position, I literally had them just walk the length of the weight room. Like it's like a narrow, long weight room. I was like, get your tailbone where it should be, push the crown of your head to the ceiling, and now walk as slow as you need to not have those points move. And they were like, oh my God, my abs are working. Like, well, you're upright. They should be working, right? So like, and I probably come across like I'm a dick when I do this to people, right? Because it boils down to, you don't know how to breathe, you don't know how to stand. But
yeah, you've come across that way many times, but I appreciate it.
But by then extension, we also don't know how to squat and sprint, jump, whatever. Yeah. So that absolutely plays into it. And it's the same, you know, like that's one of the reasons I think that running has such a bad rap with injuries, because we just assume we can do it and just go into it whole hog and go, look, most people would never just like get in the gym and be like, cool, I'm going to squat 6 days a week. But some people will go out and run 5 or 6 days a week, right? Because we're built to it. We're bipedal organisms. Why would we not do that? And I think that's a big part of why it gets a bad rap there, is just because there's so much assumed knowledge from all of us when we do these things. And you know,
it's one of those things that you can't just go out and run.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you're doing it right.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So I think having the mindset of always being a beginner is probably the best lesson that anyone, even if they're a beginner now, develop it and keep that. But even if you're an advanced athlete, like treat yourself like you're a beginner, because at some point, someone like Dave is probably going to come along and be like, you realize the bar is crooked on your back, right? When there's 750 pounds on it. And that's why like your right spinal erector is always jacked up. And you're going to have that moment where you're like, if only I had just had the lack of ego to like look for the simple stuff, I guess.
Yeah. So what have you been up to?
Oh, what have I been up to? It's been a busy few weeks. I've been event testing. I've been driving up to Sandusky and Toledo a lot, preparing for the competition.
Has your bruise gone down from the ferry now?
That bruise has gone down. I've got other new bruises. This Friday I'm up in Toledo again doing a surprise secret medley test. Never been done before. So I'm going to get some good footage of that. But last week I pulled the ferry boat.
Can you pull up the ferry boat? Are we able to do that?
That was 130 tons of dead weight plus people on it. And
do we say dead
fuel.
weight? Were the people dead?
I don't know what they're keeping the cargo hold. I'm not the captain. I don't
How
judge.
old's the boat?
I'm not responsible for this. Oh,
It's a pretty good boat. It was a really impressive event. I thought it might be harder. That was the first ever attempt doing it.
Mm-hmm.
The rope itself ended up being about 200 pounds once
What's
ago.
the diameter of the rope?
Just under 2 inches or about 2 inches.
damn. I mean, you've got the performance enhancing hat on.
Yes.
That obviously helped a lot.
I do love my performance enhancing hat and the performance enhancing garbage bag. That was a great last minute
Oh, is that
addition.
what that is?
Yeah,
I taped on a garbage bag on the floor so I could actually skid on it.
that's fantastic.
That did help a lot. So that trick is getting the boat to move. Once it was moving, it was keeping up with the speed and making sure that you're still pulling it through.
Yeah. And then having a quick enough turnaround that it doesn't stop.
Yeah, so there's a little technique. John Mauser there and Bruce Hamilton. There was a pro wrestler that day. He competes for WWE, does some special appearances. He was there that day, somehow just bumped into us. John Mauser was his coach at some point for Strongman. So it just happened to be he's walking past like, John? we roped him into we roped him into trying out the boat. He loved it. He made some great posts about it. But that was the one technique I had to show them through because of that weight of the rope in the water. Every time you pull over, normally people would let go of the rope and start pulling over, but because it's so heavy and it wants to pull away from you, if you let go of it, it sinks all the way. So you have to pull it in, lock it with your elbow, and then reach over with the other arm, and then
So I was thinking, like, now you've got water resistance rather than air resistance, like a triple, and you also have currents that I guess could be pushing it away.
So luckily, where we did that was in a bay.
Okay.
So it's like a jet slip you can see there. You can see a little bit of waves out in the open, but the moment you're inside this little slip, the water's perfectly calm.
Cool.
And you can even see some wind on the flags. None of that affected the boat.
Okay.
How soon till the rope gets wet when you're pulling?
It's wet right away. Yeah. So like I was using good gloves. I spent a whole week researching gloves.
How are the other events coming up or coming around?
Very well. There's some very surprising, unique events. As I said before, I hate plates, anything plate loaded. So we're staying away from any plate loaded events. So it's going to be very unique looking so far. We're going to have a lot of coverage by the...
You're talking so much like a promoter right now.
Yeah.
Tell me about some of the events you can tell us about.
Oh, what can I do?
I know you got to keep things in the bag, but come on.
This will be an announcement if I say anything. All right, so...
Just basic. Like you do have a deadlift type event.
We do have a deadlift type event. It's going to be fantastic. I've borrowed the bar from you already. I spent
it involves a bar. Okay, we know that.
It involves a bar,
Yeah.
but that's about it. I was at the fab shop yesterday. We have the designs for the attachment. Let's say it will involve heavy equipment.
Yeah, that will be a good one. I know that one. But that's going to be.
There's going to be an exciting medley on Friday, the one that I'm going to test this Friday. Very athletic, very cardio, and it will involve some of that showmanship of the American football. You know, back when they used to run through walls or perform cool tricks. There's a little spoiler there.
Yeah.
How much do you think that needs to come back into Strongman? Because
Yes.
there's going to be a group of spectators that have the opinion that, like, and I'm not taking anything away from the level of performance of the athletes involved, but people miss the squatting bars with Playboy bunnies attached to them and whatever, carrying fridges, whatever. So how much of that for you is like a quintessential, like an essential part of Strongman that probably needs to come back?
Absolutely essential. Do I think it needs to be in every single competition, especially on the more amateur level? No. If you can afford to add it in, absolutely. It looks great for the audience. It looks great for the athletes. At a professional level, yes, every single event needs to be a show. Well, I don't know why anyone would want to pay to watch you lift a deadlift with plates on it, unless it's a deadlift specific competition where we get to see the 505 kilogram deadlift record by Thor. That was interesting to see just because I know that's what I'm going to see. But if I'm going to see a competition, I don't want to see another deadlift.
Sure. Well, you can just pay $5 to go to a local powerlifting meet and watch that.
Yeah.
I guess. So.
Pretty much. So staying away from the mundane, trying to add something different. Granted, I'm going to have 2 events. Some guys already know, so this can be a sort of announcement. There will most likely be stones. Slater's doing a fantastic job of putting the stones together for me. They will be the regular weights that we use, but we're also trying to play around with the platform, making it look a little more exciting. And one of the other events is a truck pull. Granted, I could use any truck. It doesn't matter what truck I use. And we just did have a truck pull competition in UK over this last weekend. The guys did fantastic. It was a big British motor show. There were over 60,000 audience members, and visitors of the show. So a good number of those actually saw our competition. Even in that case, the event that I'm setting up is a unique gas tanker. That's all chrome. All fancy, never been done before as far as I know. So there's a ton of safety compliance, security, like all these little things that we have to go through to make sure that we can bring a tanker into public and pull it and keep it safe. But to me, that is worth it, because on camera, seeing that chrome tanker pull down the street in front of a crowd is going to be fantastic. So, that wow.
Blow it up at the end.
Oh man, I'm trying to put sparklers on, even the close sparklers. The amount of questions and security issues we have to go through, like how far away they have to be from the tanker and whatnot. It's.
I can imagine. And do you have a list of the crew questions?
Yeah, we got them right here.
Okay. All right. So while you're looking through those, let me tell everybody that we have a 10% discount code, Table Talk. Right now on the site, we have 25% off apparel, bands, and straps and wraps and sleeves. And this 10% adds an additional 10% to the 25%. So head over to elitefts.com, help support the content and podcast.